Hi, this is Melanie Goralnik, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 25th issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first story is Canada announces retaliation measures, hits back with $27.6 billion tariff blitz on U.S. goods, by Brian Passafiume. Ottawa, we stand united. That was the message Tuesday from Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne in announcing Canada's retaliation measures against the Donald Trump White House's latest trade war salvo. Quote, "We stand united in our response. We stand united in our resolve. We stand united in fighting for Canada," Champagne said. Joined by other cabinet ministers, Champagne made the much-anticipated announcement during a press conference in Ottawa. Weeks of intense talks failed to produce a deal when Canada walked away from the bargaining table after a number of last-minute additions by the White House. Canada plans a dollar-for-dollar retaliation strategy, totaling $27.6 billion and targeting a wide range of U.S. imports. The counter tariffs, set to take effect on September 8th, consist of more than 800 specific products, matching U.S. imposed levies at 15%, 25%, and 50%. So, what's impacted? Imported goods from the United States, including vinyl floor coverings, industrial adhesives, clothing, furniture, shoes, sporting equipment, and select U.S. distilled spirits are among the hundreds of items subject to new tariffs. Here's the brief rundown of sectors and products impacted. Steel, aluminum, and metal products. Tariffs announced by Canada on Tuesday include increasing the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from 25% to 50%. Those new tariffs cover everything from raw materials to finished products. Raw and semi-finished metal products targeted by Canada's tariffs include hot-rolled steel sheets, raw steel ingots, aluminum and steel plates, alloy ingots of steel and aluminum, stainless steel rods, and cold-reduced metal coils. Structural components for construction, including metal I-beams, structural support members, sheet piling, heavy plate steel, and scaffolding are included, as are derived metal hardware including industrial racks, wire, metal piping, and fasteners such as screws, rivets, bolts, and hardware. Metal storage containers will also see tariffs. These tariffs will be matched up to 50%, depending on the category and product. Forestry, pulp, and paper. Both raw and processed paper products imported from the U.S. will see matching 50% tariffs, including chemical wood pulp, mechanical pulp and recycled paperboard, as well as rolls of newsprint, printing paper, wallpaper, toilet paper and paper towels, facial tissues, and corrugated cardboard. Processed wood products such as plywood, certain building materials, laminate sheets, and fiberboard will also be subject to cross-border levies. Dairy, seafood, and agriculture. American dairy products subject to new 25% tariffs include retail cheese such as cheddar, cheese spreads and mozzarella, butter, whey concentrate, skimmed and whole powdered milk, and liquid cream. Live fish will also be levied, both food stock and ornamental and aquarium fish, including Atlantic and Pacific salmon, commercial trout, bluefin tuna, and carp. Processed goods such as cut flours, seed, grain concentrates, and pet food is also listed. Agricultural equipment and heavy machinery. Farm machinery such as combines, balers, swathers, seeders, manure spreaders, and tractors will see tariffs of between 15 and 25%, as well as industrial and construction machines like excavators, bulldozers, forklifts, front-end loaders, and mobile cranes. Consumer goods and electronics. This category subject to tariffs of up to 25%. Includes major appliances and household white goods such as washing machines and dryers, refrigerators, dishwashers and electric ovens, small kitchen, commercial and home appliances like coffee makers, microwave ovens, food processors and vacuum cleaners, and consumer electronics like smartphones, computer and networking equipment, optical fiber cables, and video game consoles. That story was Canada announces retaliation measures, hits back with $27.6 billion tariff blitz on U.S. goods, by Brian Passafiume. In related news, the next story is Ugly Face of Trade Deals Disturbing Jeffrey Epstein Links, by Brad Hunter. Howard Lutnick is the ugly face of bullying in the Canada-U.S. trade negotiations. Conspiracy enthusiasts posit that the Trump administration's heavy-handed approach to Canada and other stunned allies has much to do with a dead pedophile named Jeffrey Epstein. Comms people call this a distraction. I am not on side with this theory yet. Lutnick, a billionaire financier and the former CEO of monster brokerage Cantor Fitzgerald, is on the periphery of the sordid Epstein epic. But Lutnick has made seemingly contradictory statements and has been caught in a slew of what falsehoods lie under oath when testifying about his relationship with Epstein, who topped himself in 2019, leading some to accuse him of lying, an allegation Lutnick denies. Lutnick's nagging Epstein connection. Epstein was awaiting trial for sex trafficking. Now, thousands of pages of previously secret files are pulling back the curtain on people like Lutnick. Quote, he caught himself in Jeffrey Epstein's web. The author of this seminal Epstein tome, Barry Levine, told the Toronto Sun. His story has been that he once stopped by Epstein's house, they were next-door neighbors in New York, and saw the massage table and found it creepy. Lutnick and his wife said they were creeped out. Lutnick claimed that after that incident, he had nothing to do with Epstein. But Levine, who wrote the bestseller called The Spider, Inside the Tangled Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, believes, quote, multiple events chronicled in the Epstein files showed he was lying. There was the time he stopped in with his wife and kids for lunch with the master manipulator at his Caribbean redoubt. It turns out he's a little sleazy. Lutnick was caught lying in front of the House Oversight Committee. It turned out that he forgot about all his other interactions, Levine noted. It turned out questions were raised about Lutnick's truthfulness, and in front of the committee. Turns out he's a little sleazy. To me, it's very disconcerting. But don't take it from my old friend Levine. Both Democrats and Republicans found the loudmouth Trump insider to have been less than truthful at the committee looking into Epstein's numerous crimes. Quote, he was evasive, nervous, he was dishonest. Republican Suhas Subramaniam, which is a Democrat from Virginia, told reporters. He would not admit to lying, which he clearly did. Another Democrat on the committee, Representative James Walkinshaw from Virginia, added, quote, they deserve to see the sweat on the secretary's brow as he struggles to answer basic questions about his lies to the American people. Suspecting that the businessman was less than 100% truthful, Republican Chair James Comer warned, quote, if we find that there were any misstatements by Lutnick, it's a felony to lie to Congress, and you'll be held accountable. Comer would later say that Lutnick's testimony was very transparent. It becomes a matter of judgment. Lutnick has never been accused of wrongdoing in regards to Epstein's heinous crimes. But there is a matter of judgment if you're the guy Trump is looking to for answers. To wit, visited Epstein's infamous island with his family in 2012, which is quite a feat since he originally claimed he split from the sex monster in 2005. Lutnick claimed that his original statement indicated he was accurate and said he was never alone with Epstein after 2005. Lutnick said he and Epstein were neighbors between 2005 and 2019, when they met for a quick coffee. That's when he saw the notorious massage table during a tour of Epstein's manse. And Lutnick cut him off in 2005, right? Nope. They had the lunch at Pedophile Island in 2012. He was also caught short when he scrambled as to why he was on Epstein's island. Lutnick called it inexplicable. This stuff all needs greater explanation and clarity, Levine said. Lutnick continued his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein long after the wealthy pedophile pleaded guilty in Florida in 2008 to felony charges of soliciting prostitution and procuring a person under the age of 18 for prostitution. Palm Beach cops knew Epstein was sexually assaulting underage girls, but political pressure torpedoed the heavier charges that would have seen the pervert put away for good. It's a real question of character. Not really the kind of guy you want around. Quote, Howard Lutnick has access to information. There's no question he wouldn't have known about Epstein's arrest and conviction, but still he associated with him, Levine said. It's a real question of character. He has a lot more to answer for to the American public. That story was Ugly Face of Trade Deals Disturbing Jeffrey Epstein Links by Brad Hunter. The next story is David Ennis, who killed 6 members of a family camping in BC, denied parole by Gordon Anderson. A man who killed 6 members of a family and sexually assaulted one of them in the early 1980s has been denied parole for the 4th time. David Ennis shot and killed George and Edith Bentley and daughter Jackie Johnson and her husband Bob, and eventually grandchildren Janet, 13, and Karen, 11, while they camped at Wells Grape Park near Clearwater, BC in August 1982. Ennis was arrested in November of the following year in Dawson Creek, BC. He was found guilty of murder in April 1984. Supreme Court Justice Harry McKay, presiding over the case at the time, described the crimes as a cold-blooded and senseless execution of 6 defenseless and innocent people, a slaughter that devastated 3 generations in a single bound. What a tragedy. What a waste. Ennis was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years for the 6 murders. Violent sexual fantasies. The August 19 decision by the Parole Board of Canada said that Ennis, formerly known as David Shearling, still posed a significant risk of offending if released. I should say reoffending. The parole board noted Ennis stalked the campsite and watched the victims prior to killing the 4 adults. He then kept the 2 children alive for days, sexually assaulting the older girl. Ennis then lit the family's vehicle on fire with all of the 6 bodies inside. Several weeks later, a worker reported finding a burned-out car near Battle Mountain Road, similar to the one the Johnsons were driving. When the RCMP searched the vehicle, they found the 4 missing adults, shot in the head with a .22 caliber weapon. In the trunk were the remains of the 2 girls. The parole board said Ennis had undergone a psychological risk assessment in June. He said he no longer experienced violent sexual fantasies, but he still fantasized about sexual role-playing with dominant themes in which there is no violence or physical harm. The parole board also said that Ennis admitted that had he not been caught for these murders, it was likely he would have committed a heinous crime of a similar nature. Ennis was previously denied parole in 2008, 2012, and 2021. There is a picture of David Ennis, who is then known as David Shearing, and it's a sort of out of focus black and white close-up of just his face. I mean, I don't even see his forehead here. It looks like he has brown eyes. He's got a short mustache and just a very conservative haircut and a button-up shirt. Photo credit goes to File Photo. That story was David Ennis, who killed 6 members of a family camping in BC, denied parole. By Gordon Anderson. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Blue Jays lose Shane Bieber to shoulder injury as playoff race heats up, by Rob Langley. Just what the Blue Jays needed as the race to the postseason intensifies. The team announced on Tuesday that starter Shane Bieber, who had been in sharp form in his recent outings, is headed to the 15-day injured list with a shoulder injury. Officially described by the team as teres major inflammation, Bieber will miss at least 2 starts, and likely more should a rehab assignment be necessary. The loss of Bieber is a huge blow to the Jays' rotation, given how strong he has pitched of late. The team is opening a 3-game series against the Kansas City Royals on Tuesday night at the Rogers Center to kick off a 6-game homestand. To make room on the roster, the Jays have recalled right-hander Chad Dallas from AAA Buffalo. The right-hander was activated for Tuesday's game. What are Jays losing in Bieber? The right-hander heads to the IL despite coming off one of the most effective stretches of his season, the start of which was delayed due to injury. This past Thursday, Bieber shut down the AL leading Rays, holding them to 1 run over 7 innings in a big 5-1 win. His start prior to that, he held the Yankees to 1 run back on August 14th. It was widely felt that the recent jump in form would be a key to the playoff push for the Jays, who began Tuesday's play with a record of 64-68, 2 games out of the final AL wild card spot. The shoulder injury is a new development for Bieber, who was absent early in the season with forearm and elbow injuries that were seen as a continuation of his recovery from Tommy John surgery in 2024. What now with Jays' rotation? With Bieber out, manager John Schneider will have to come up with a creative situation yet again, the continuation of a season-long battle that has seen the rotation ravaged with injury. And his absence puts more pressure on the front end of a rotation that includes Monday's starter, Max Scherzer, ace Dylan Cease, and trade deadline acquisition Spencer Arrighetti. Bieber joins Trey Yesavage, who has the knee problem, among the walking wounded in the starter crew. Best case for the rookie right-hander is a late-season return, but that is far from guaranteed. The veteran was scheduled to make his next start against the Royals on Wednesday. At least Arrighetti, acquired from Houston at the trade deadline, has returned to action and is a possibility to slide into a starting role, though his pitch count was limited to 61 in his only Jays appearance thus far. There is a picture of Shane Bieber of the Toronto Blue Jays as he's winding up to give a pitch. He's just about to snap back, and wow, his arms look like they're like rubber bands. They're just so elongated and like curled in the most unnatural looking way. Photo credit goes to Getty Images. That story was Blue Jays lose Shane Bieber to shoulder injury as playoff race heats up, by Rob Langley. The next story is 49ers owner Jed York's messages to prostitution site before trailer park arrest revealed, by Dan Balicki. Police documents paint a picture that San Francisco 49ers owner Jed York was desperate to meet with a prostitute ahead of his arrest on Sunday. In a Mahoning Valley Human Trafficking Task Force report obtained by the California Post, York is stated to have used an alias while sending repeated messages over the course of the weekend as he attempted to arrange a sexual encounter at a trailer park in Ohio. ESPN reported on Monday that court documents showed York, the majority owner and CEO of the NFL's San Francisco 49ers, allegedly responding to an ad on a known prostitution website, and, quote, arranged to have sexual activity with the female in exchange for $140, though Tuesday's report stated the actual number was $160. What did York say in his messages? York messaged the female and advised that his name was Joe and that he would like to visit the female, police detectives stated in the document, adding that he sent a second message later in the day after not receiving a response. He, quote, advised that he was just checking in and was seeing if the female was available, the report stated. After both messages on Saturday went unanswered, York pinged the site again on Sunday morning, asking, quote, if the female was free and that he would love to come see her, the report stated. York said that he was in Boardman, Ohio, and then asked for an address to meet before querying how much the woman charged for an hour. York was advised that full-service sexual activity was $160, with unprotected sex being $20 more, officials wrote in the report. York advised that the $160 worked for him, and he was on his way to the trailer park. He was then arrested upon arrival at the location, Wheat Hill MHP in East Palestine, Ohio, at 9:35 a.m. in a rental car while in possession of the cell phone used to arrange the meeting and the agreed-to amount in cash. Police confirmed that York's phone had been used to send the messages. Quote, a test text message to York's iPhone revealed that it was the one used to arrange the criminal activity. York was driving an Avis rental car at the time of the arrest, the report said. York pleaded no contest after the charges were amended from one count of engaging in prostitution to a disorderly conduct charge. He also was convicted of possessing criminal tools. He was sentenced to serve 1 day in jail, but he was given credit for time served, and also was ordered to pay $1,150 in fines. Who is Jed York? York was born in Youngstown, Ohio, which is 35 kilometers from the location of his arrest. The 46-year-old has been the team's chief executive officer since 2008, and later became the Niners' majority owner in 2024. He has been married to Danielle Beluomini for 15 years, but reportedly filed for divorce this past May. The pair shares 2 sons, Jackson and Brixton, who are minors. What have the 49ers and the NFL said? The Niners said in a statement on Monday that the team would not be providing any further comment at this time, because York's arrest was a legal matter that had been resolved. According to TMZ, the NFL is aware of the incident and will be looking into the matter. Quote, we are aware of the matter, which will be reviewed under the personal conduct policy, a league spokesperson told the outlet. The San Francisco 49ers are preparing to fly to Australia next week for their season opener against the Los Angeles Rams. The team has been dealing with several injuries during training camp, with many commentators attributing to the ailments to an electrical substation located near the team's practice facility. There is the mugshot picture of the San Francisco 49ers owner Jed York. He has really dark brown hair. He's kind of a bigger guy, and he looks to be 5'9" because he's standing against the measuring, where they have the lines on the wall, and he's just past the 5'8" mark. He's wearing a V-neck t-shirt that's orange, and he's looking into the camera with a pretty sad expression. Photo courtesy of East Palestine Police Force. That story was 49ers owner Jed York's messages to prostitution site before trailer park arrest revealed. By Dan Balicki. The next story is, could Donald Trump actually rename Lake Ontario? By Brian Towie. You can point to a car and call it a grilled cheese sandwich, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a car. And so it is with U.S. President Donald Trump and his plan to rename Lake Ontario Lake America, amid his trade war with Canada and his war of words with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The move calls to mind Trump's bid to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, following trade tensions with that country. Quote, "The United States is giving serious consideration to changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America, in that we don't expect to be doing much business with Ontario any longer. Thank you for your attention to this matter," Trump wrote in a Truth Social post. He even posted an image of a map of Lake Ontario, with that name crossed out and replaced with Lake America in giant gold font. Plus, it had an American flag flying over Toronto. Canada's not taking the bait. Minister for Canada-U.S. Trade Dominic LeBlanc wouldn't comment on Trump's provocations, saying to CNBC, quote, "We've decided as a federal government months ago not to respond to sort of the daily social media posts of either the president or his cabinet secretaries. We're focused on doing what we can in Canada to build our economy and to having a conservative relationship with the government of the United States, our most important trading partner." But the question remains, could Trump actually do this if he wanted? The short answer is, on his own maps, yes he can. But it won't change a thing for Canada or anyone else. Jointly managed waterway. Lake Ontario is an international waterway shared by Canada and the United States. Numerous agencies and organizations oversee it on both sides: international, federal, provincial, state, and municipal. Ontario and New York State each govern their own portions of the lake and the shore, and Canada and the U.S. manage it together through the International Joint Commission and the Great Lakes Water Agreement. If Trump wants to unilaterally change a geographic name for his own government's use, like he did with the Gulf of Mexico, he can absolutely do that. But he doesn't get to tell other countries what they call it. How could Trump do it? Just like he did with the Gulf of Mexico, Trump could issue an executive order to rename Lake Ontario. An executive order vests the president with the executive power over the government and can order the government to, quote, "take specific actions to ensure the laws be faithfully executed." But they don't override federal laws and statutes. So, an executive order empowers Trump to order the federal government to take any steps he sees fit within the constitutional authority of the executive branch, the part of the U.S. government that is responsible for enforcing laws passed by Congress and do not violate federal law. Presidents often use them. Some are small, such as declaring a federal holiday, but others have been amongst the most consequential in American history. Abraham Lincoln used one and called it the Emancipation Proclamation. Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed one to force the internment of Japanese Americans during the Second World War. Lyndon Johnson signed one requiring government contractors to comply with civil rights obligations. And Trump signed one to rescind that order. And Trump loves his executive orders. During his first 2 weeks in office, he signed almost 40 of them, covering all kinds of policy and aspects of American life. Opponents are challenging many of them in court. Can Trump be stopped? Absolutely. The U.S. Constitution was written to include a set of checks and balances so that no one branch wields more power than the other. Congress can enact laws that reverse what the president does, provided it has the authority to legislate on the issue. A court can hold an executive order unlawful if it violates the Constitution or a federal statute. A future president can issue a new executive order rescinding or amending the old ones, as Trump did to Johnson's. There is a picture of the image that was shared via social media by the White House today, and it is a map of the United States made out of Legos. So the bottom is like a sheet of blue Legos, and then everything else is on top of it. So each state is of a different color, like it's either green, orange, or yellow, or beige. And then it does show where the Lake Ontario is. It says Lake America in red, white, and blue. Yeah, there it is. Photo courtesy of, I guess, the White House. That story was Could Donald Trump Actually Rename Lake Ontario? By Brian Toey. The next story is Stars React to Dolly Parton's Death. The World Feels a Lot Less Sparkly by Mark Danielle. The death of country music superstar Dolly Parton led to an outpouring of tributes on social media. Parton's family announced the Jolene singer died peacefully Tuesday afternoon in Nashville at the age of 80, calling her a global icon and humanitarian. Quote, "A rhinestone life that shone bright enough for the world to see, Dolly will forever stand as an inspiration not only through her timeless music and prolific songwriting, but also her wit, warmth, and kindness that made us all feel like family," read a message on her Instagram page. Dolly Parton's legacy is one of love, compassion, and resilience. Her songs will continue to resonate with people of all ages, and her philanthropic work will have a lasting impact. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The statement went on to reveal that Parton's immediate family will hold a small private service for the star. Quote, "Dolly's fans and friends from around the world are encouraged to pay tribute to Dolly on social media by tagging @DollyParton or by leaving a message at www.dollyparton.com. The message continued. In lieu of flowers, the family asks for donations to be made to Dolly Parton's Imagination Library at www.imaginationlibrary.com. There will never, ever be another you. Parton's many friends in the music community and her legion of fans were quick to pay tribute to the Grammy winner. On X, Casey Musgrave said Dolly Parton's death really hurts. Quote, "The world feels a lot less sparkly all of a sudden. So glad she's with her late husband, Carl Dean. No one talked to me today." Sheryl Crow said Parton's death had left a hole in the universe. Quote, "Well, I just got the news that my buddy, Dolly, passed on to the higher and greater side. Dolly, thank you for all the wonderful things you did for us here on Earth. Your love, your music, and you gave so much with your huge heart. There will never, ever be another you." Country singer Reba McEntire wrote via Instagram and X. Quote, "We will remember and cherish every moment and every note that you ever played and sang. Thank you, Lord, for Dolly. She's going to have a blast in heaven singing all her favorite songs with all her family and friends who have gone on before her. I'll never forget the first time I met you, and I'll never forget our last conversation. I hold it with love in my heart. I will always love you, signed Reba." On Facebook, rapper Eminem shared a note that Dolly gave him when they were both inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022. In which she said she always felt a connection to him. Quote, "Even though I don't know a lot about rap music, I've come to know that you are the very best at it," she wrote. "I had hoped to meet you at the show, but you know how nuts those things are. Maybe someday we'll meet." A true country music icon. On Truth Social, U.S. President Donald Trump called Parton's death a true loss for millions of people. Quote, "There has never been anyone like her, and never will," he wrote. Trump went on to add that he would be lowering the American flag across the U.S. for 1 week. Parton's friend and 9 to 5 co-star Lily Tomlin called her the great harmonizer of humanity and comedy treasure on X. Jamie Lee Curtis said Parton was a great example for us all. Quote, "They say, don't meet your heroes. They were wrong about her. Her bravery to know that she was much more than they thought she was, and that she needed to break away and move into new work and new possibilities, led her to write 'I Will Always Love You' as her way of thanking and loving, but moving on," she wrote on Instagram. Her Steel Magnolias co-star Sally Field said the world had lost an angel. Quote, "If there are truly angels on earth, then we have just lost one. Dolly Parton," Field wrote on Instagram. "There will never be another. I adored her with all my heart and will always cherish our time together. Forever. Rest in peace, beautiful Dolly." Paris Hilton shared a message on X alongside a photo posing with the country legend. Her talent, heart, and kindness touched so many lives, and she truly left this world better than she found it, Hilton wrote. In a post on X, the Grand Ole Opry praised Parton for being a true country music icon. Quote, "There is no doubt Dolly's mark on the world and on us here at the Grand Ole Opry will be deeply felt for generations to come. She taught us to always lead with kindness, generosity, and compassion," they wrote in part. Meanwhile, Kelly Clarkson said Parton's legacy was one of kindness. Quote, "Dolly Parton had a way of making everyone feel special, and seen, and welcomed, as if you were old friends," she wrote on Instagram. "I will miss her heart and her voice, as I am sure millions will." There is a picture of Dolly Parton as she performs on the Pyramid stage on the final day of the 2014 Glastonbury Festival, and she is wearing a long-sleeved white shirt that has a vest over it that is full of white rhinestones. And she's also wearing tons of jewelry, rings and bracelets, and they look like diamonds that are sparkling, and some of them are in star shapes. She has her very light blonde hair long, and it's kind of poofed out, and she's got both of her hands kind of like pointing at the sky, almost like she's shooting guns. And she's got a really cute expression on her face, and there's a little microphone coming out from behind her ear. Photo courtesy of Leon Neal via AFP via Getty Images. There is also a picture of Dolly Parton posing in a kitchen with Paris Hilton. Wow, these ladies, they look fabulous. Paris Hilton is wearing a barely there gold sequin dress. It looks like maybe a piece of fabric that's just draped over the front. There's like nothing on the side, maybe a tie or something. I think I'm actually looking at her pink thong on the side. Anyway, she's got this long blonde hair. She's got her hand on her hip. She's really working it. And then next to her is Dolly Parton wearing the dang cutest red, like a cowgirl dress. And the cleavage goes like all the way down to her belt. And she has a very big chest, so there's a lot of cleavage there. But it always looks innocent on her. I don't know how she does it. Anyway, she's also posing with her hand on her hip, and her elbow has fringe hanging down from this red dress. And her blonde hair is up with a little bit of bangs hanging down, and she looks gorgeous. Photo courtesy of Paris Hilton. That story was Stars React to Dolly Parton's death. The world feels a lot less sparkly, by Mark Danielle. The next story is Trade War. Quebec Liberals propose emergency measures for province, by Kalina Laframboise. Parti Québécois leader Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon slammed Canada's new round of retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. on Tuesday, saying it isn't the way to handle the escalating trade war. Quote, "Dollar for dollar tariffs are a bad strategy for Quebec SMEs, which is small and medium-sized businesses," he told reporters in Montreal. "And I repeat to everyone, to all of us, that during the first wave of tariffs, several economists and experts examined the possibility of a dollar-for-dollar approach, and the analysis was quite clear in that regard." Quote, "And I remind you that we are now in a context where Quebec is bearing the brunt of the American tariffs." St. Pierre Plamondon's remarks came as he introduced four party candidates with a focus on economics, including former Finance Minister Nicolas Marceau. The provincial election campaign has not yet been officially launched, but Quebecers are heading to the polls October 5th. Last week, the PQ leader said trade talks would be different if Quebec were its own country and able to directly defend its interests. On Tuesday, St. Pierre Plamondon warned, quote, "Adding financial pressure to our businesses in this dollar-for-dollar strategy could be very, very damaging to Quebec companies." He said measures should be instead surgical, based on what strategically impacts certain high-energy sectors. Canada announced it will impose up to 50% counter tariffs on the U.S. on a range of products, including steel and aluminum, starting September 8th. They will also apply to such sectors as dairy, appliances, agriculture equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. As a part of the plan, Ottawa also pledged $7.5 billion in support for Canadian businesses. Quebec Premier Christine Frechette said her message to Ottawa has been heard, adding that direct support will be given to affected workers, and Quebec businesses will also receive financial assistance. Addressing the situation on social media, she said, "Our teams will carefully analyze the list of affected products as part of the tariffs coming into effect next month." Quote, "The trade war, created entirely by U.S. President Donald Trump, is already having significant impacts and adding another layer of instability to Quebec. Canada had to respond," she wrote on X. "I will stand in solidarity with this response, but I will not compromise when it comes to protecting our jobs and Quebec's interests." Earlier Tuesday, Quebec Liberal leader Charles Milliard unveiled proposed emergency measures to help the province's small and medium-sized businesses in response to the intensifying trade war. Milliard described his plan as robust late Tuesday morning in Montreal, saying the measures will not only help businesses, but help save jobs. The Liberals would issue a temporary suspension on contributions to the province's Health Services Fund for businesses directly affected by tariffs. As part of the plan, it would also take 25% of the aid for eligible companies into direct, non-repayable assistance for businesses with revenues between $1 million and $2 million. Quote, "Part of the support could continue to take the form of a loan, but this enhancement would allow smaller businesses to obtain immediate assistance without further increasing their debt burden," the party said in a news release. Asked if he had concerns over whether retaliatory tariffs will affect Quebec businesses, Milliard said, "One thing I think is that we need to show solidarity with our colleagues in Canada." "I'm largely in favor of what I've seen," he said of Ottawa's measures. "I haven't seen all the details for every sector, but I saw several pages just before we arrived. There are certain very specific sectors where, if we don't produce in Canada, we could perhaps consider not having so many tariffs or ensure we have products that will allow us, components that allow us to produce finished goods. But overall, I'm in favor of this strategy." That story was Trade War. Quebec Liberals propose emergency measures for province, by Kalina Lamframboise. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is How the Legend of Buck Martinez Began at TSN Before Thriving at Sportsnet by Rob Longley. He became both the face of a franchise and the voice of a network. But before Buck Martinez reached his zenith of popularity at Sportsnet, his roots were with what was always the latter network's biggest rival. It was more than a decade before Sportsnet would even launch, and the Blue Jays were still owned by a brewery that TSN saw talent in a just-retired catcher, and took a chance on the voice of John Albert Martinez, better known as Buck. The rest is broadcast and franchise history, a career to be recognized by the Jays this Saturday at the Rogers Center, when Martinez will be the first inductee into the team's Hall of Excellence. It wasn't exactly the extended career path the California native envisioned following the 1986 season, however, as Martinez stubbornly maintained his playing career wasn't done. "I went kicking and screaming," Martinez said in an interview. Pat Gillick, Jays GM, and Paul Beeston, team president, released me the first day after the '86 season and suggested I take a TV job, and I said, "No, I'm going to play again." Then I went home, and wife Arlene told me to call them back and tell them I can't play anymore. Then I was free to go to TSN. And with that, a playing career that ended after 6 seasons with the Jays and 17 total in the majors, extended into parts of 5 decades with the club, the roots of a legacy that established Martinez as one of the Jays' most beloved personalities. There have been many who have influenced Martinez's career since, but Beeston sits at the top of that list for what he saw in Buck beneath the catching gear. Quote, "Buck was the guy that studied the game. He was the catcher," Beeston told Keegan Matheson in his terrific book called The Franchise, Toronto Blue Jays. He had a supreme amount of confidence, and he got along with everybody. He'd played the game at a level that's so high in the major leagues, and he knew everybody in the major leagues. If there's a guy that can do it, Buck can do it. He's been a leader in spreading the gospel of baseball all across the country. What are Buck's roots at TSN? Back then, before Rogers owned both the team and Sportsnet, Jays games were spread over 3 networks. When Martinez began his broadcast career in 1987, TSN had 40 games, and Canada's first, and at the time only, all-sports network hired Martinez because they wanted their own distinctive voice. Quote, "Tony Kubik was working for the other 2 networks, and TSN wanted someone different to do their games, so they hired me," Martinez said. They wanted their own guy. Well-spoken, thanks in part to his work as a player rep and some radio gigs late in his career, the TSN brass saw potential. And from the start, network heavyweights such as Gordon Craig, Jim Thompson, and Rick Brace pushed for Martinez and championed him. "They absolutely taught me how to be broadcasters," Martinez said. As did Rick Briggs Jude, who produced the games at TSN and later would be instrumental in bringing Martinez to Sportsnet in 2010, where he would work for the remainder of his career. Martinez couldn't have landed in a better spot at that time, working at a network where current MLSE CEO Keith Pelley was a rising executive, and Scott Moore, a day-oneer at TSN who would eventually be instrumental in the launch of Sportsnet in 1998. He learned and found his voice, one that would delight Canadian sports fans for decades, ending at the conclusion of the sensational 2025 World Series. Buck's first play-by-play partner was Fergie Alver, who was replaced on the TSN game coverage by Jim Hewson in 1990. When the latter left the network in 1994, Martinez would be united with the man who was at his side for more games than anyone else, Dan Shulman. His time at Sportsnet cemented the legend, but given the roots, it's not a stretch to suggest that without TSN, Martinez's Hall of Excellence career never would have happened. How did Buck and TSN help discover Dan Shulman? Given his talent and that great broadcast voice, it was likely inevitable that Shulman was headed to becoming one of the country's great and most respected sports broadcasters. But it was an audition alongside Martinez that would launch the Jays' now iconic play-by-play voice. When his first longtime partner, Hewson, decided to move on from baseball gigs, Martinez was in line for a new partner. Quote, "I was crushed by the fact Hewson went back home to Vancouver and figured it was going to be hard to replace him," Martinez recalled. "We had a lot of guys come in for auditions, a lot of guys working in the big leagues. And then came a 28-year-old radio guy with minimal credentials, but oozing in potential. On the day of the audition, Shulman was sick, but didn't let that interfere with the career opportunity of a lifetime." Quote, "Dan's doing a game with pitchers Pat Hentgen of the Jays and Kevin Appier of the Royals, and nothing was happening," Martinez said of the audition. "No hits, no runs, there was nothing to talk about. But the Royals' Bob Hamlin hit an RBI double in the late innings, and Dan never missed a beat. He called it perfectly, right on time with proper excitement and everything else. I walked out of the room and said to Rick Briggs Jude, 'That's your guy.'" Though he has had a number of booth partners in his career, at TSN, Sportsnet, ESPN, and MASN, where he called Orioles games from 2003 to 2010, he worked more with his good friend Pat Tabler and Shulman than any others. For Shulman, it all began with that audition, despite a resume at the time that included all of one inning of baseball play-by-play, that being at a spring training contest. And it was also the beginning of a partnership that would flourish, first at TSN and later at Sportsnet. Quote, "There's no question that Buck has meant as much to me as anyone has in my career," Shulman said. "I was so young and inexperienced when I started working with him, and he could not have been more helpful. He was patient, introduced me to everyone, and taught me a ton about baseball. He's one of a kind, and I was lucky to call him a teammate for so many years." There is a really great picture of Buck Martinez with Dan Shulman. They are sitting like in a locker room where behind them there are different jerseys hanging in on a hanger in individual lockers. And they're both wearing blue sports coats, a shirt and tie, and gray pants. And Buck is a young guy with brown hair, and he is holding a baseball mitt in one hand, and then he's tossing up a baseball in the other, and he's smiling. And Dan is next to him holding a TSN network microphone, and he's kind of balding a bit. He's wearing some glasses. Anyway, they're shoulder to shoulder smiling at the camera. It's really a great pic. Photo credit of Postmedia Network Files. That story was how the legend of Buck Martinez began at TSN before thriving at Sportsnet, by Rob Longley. The next story is Mayoral Candidate Bradford Floats New Name for New York, by Brian Toey. We may no longer have Major General Isaac Brock to help us resist the Americans, but Brad Bradford might do. After U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to unilaterally change the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America, the Toronto mayoral candidate had a proposal of his own: rename New York State the Province of New York. But before you say, "This is just silliness now," hear him out. The Beaches East York councillor and main challenger to incumbent Mayor Olivia Chow has a historical reason for his proposal. "Two can play that game," Bradford said in a message to social media. "Right across the water, there's a place called New York. You've probably heard of it. and from 1664 until 1776, it was actually called the Province of New York. It was a British colony, and it was named after a duke. Now, here's what we're going to do when I'm elected mayor. We're going to change it back to the Province of New York. This is real. Look it up. I'm even happy to send Trump a plaque. And when President Trump retires, and he can't retire soon enough, he'll be able to look out his window way up in Trump Tower and see the great province of New York. Bradford. Let's go T.O. After Bradford finished his fun with the U.S. president, he brought it back to his campaign message, saying you can change the name of the lake, but you can't change the spirit of the people who live there. It's the shopkeepers, the workers, the manufacturers that are the most impacted by Washington's ludicrous policy, Bradford said. So let's do our part. Choose Toronto. Buy Canadian. Check the label and shop local, here in your neighborhood. We can't change what Washington does, but we can change how Toronto shows up for its own. That's all the time we have for this story, which was Mayoral Candidate Bradford Floats New Name for New York by Brian Toey. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 25th issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Guralnick. Thank you for listening.